Recording in progress.
Hello, it's Lynn Watts here. Today, I want to talk about resilience, and I want to share with you two different books, two different picture books that you could use in talking with children or perhaps in an individual session talking about resilience, and in particular, coping with difficult, traumatic situations or hardship. I think that certainly the idea of resilience and with the first book that I'm going to talk about, anxiety and fear of bad things happening, is certainly something that is a concern in today's culture, in today's society. If you want to read more about that and perhaps how we got in this position where so many children, young adults, teenagers, even adults are very anxious, I would recommend the book The Anxious Generation, which is written by Jonathan Haidt, or Haidt. Not really sure how to pronounce his last name, Haidt. He is a social psychologist, and he talks about a lot of different studies that have done about anxiety and in particular, uh, how anxiety has increased over a number of years. And then he has a lot of different ideas about why that's the case. But today I'm going to talk about how you can work with children where you find this is the case. And the first book that I want to share with you is a picture book. It's called The Scaredy Squirrel. All right. And so here you can see the squirrel. And obviously, this book is about anxiety, and it's about a main character, a squirrel, who is extremely anxious. And because he is so anxious, he has an emergency kit. He rarely ever leaves his tree, and he spends most of his day anticipating, looking for bad things to happen. And as the story goes along, first of all, you can see that he is very stuck in this kind of anxious mindset. But you can also see it doesn't really go into a history of how he got this way, but you can see that at least on a day-to-day basis, he has very little to be anxious about, mainly because he doesn't do anything but worry about what could happen. And eventually, of course, something bad does happen, although it doesn't seem very bad, I guess, in our um, way of looking at it. But what he describes as a killer bee comes into his vision, and it gets him so upset that he knocks his emergency kit out of the tree, so he doesn't have it to rely on, and he runs away from the bee. And eventually, really nothing much happens with the bee, but it is sort of an eye-opening experience for him that shows that he can cope, and that because he hasn't been out of the tree very much, he is suddenly aware that, hey, there's a whole nother world out here that he's missing out on. So that is pretty much the gist of the story. Of course, it then goes on to talk about what kind of changes he might make in his day-to-day behavior. And I think it is a good book for talking about a child who already has anxiety, in particular, one who anticipates a lot of bad things happening, not necessarily someone who has had a traumatic experience, but rather someone who is anticipating it. Certainly, the idea of having an emergency kit or being prepared for bad things is not a bad idea. Prevention and being proactive is a good idea. So I think you can certainly talk about that and about ways to be prepared. But also, I think the concept that this character is missing out on a great deal, all because he is worried that bad things might happen. So the idea that in avoiding bad things, you're also avoiding the possibility of very good things and missing out on the whole experience, the whole life experience. So that's the book Scaredy Squirrel. I noticed that the author has written several other books, but this is, I think, the first one. And I think this is the one that makes the most sense to use with a child who is anxious. The second book that I want to talk about today is a book that I think is not so much about anxiety as it is about resilience. It's called A Chair for My Mother. And the gist of this story is it's about a little girl, her mother that she lives with, and her grandmother. So the three of them live together. Her mother's a waitress in a diner. Her mother comes home very, very tired every day from work, and she does not have a comfortable chair to sit in. And then there's a backstory that they then bring about or share in the book, where the reason she doesn't have a comfortable chair is because one day coming home from shopping, a very happy, pleasant day where the little girl in the story has just gotten new shoes, and it's a very sunny day, very upbeat, happy. And they come around the corner and they realize that the apartment building that they live in is on fire. Luckily, the grandmother gets out safely, their cat gets out safely, but all of their furniture and everything in the apartment is destroyed. So they wind up living with a relative for a short period of time. Then they move into a new apartment. And in this new apartment, they have no furniture. So different friends and neighbors help them by giving them some furniture, but there's no comfortable chair for the mother. So the story then goes on to talk about how they have been collecting coins from the mother's tips that she gets as a waitress. And when the jar gets full, they're going to go find a comfortable chair for her mother. So I think there's a lot of different layers to this story, but the one that I really want to focus on is the way that this family copes with what could be, and certainly is, a very traumatic and upsetting situation. And that is where their apartment that they live in and everything they own is destroyed in a fire. And so I think there is a chance here to talk about, so how does this family cope with it? What do they do? To talk about the support that they get from the community, to talk about feelings that they have, and then talk about how they, despite this very upsetting situation, they continue on by maintaining their previous fairly normal kind of life, but set a goal for how they're going to buy this chair for the mother so that she is comfortable again after coming home from work. And so I think it's a very reassuring story. I think it's a story that can help a child understand that other people also have very upsetting, traumatic situations, and that there are ways to cope through support from others, through setting small goals, through working through what they are left with, but looking for positive things even in the midst of such hardship. So two, I think, very different approaches to resilience and the kind of coping mechanisms that we all can develop based on that. But I think these are great stories to begin a dialogue with a child about resilience and coping with hard things. So again, the one book is A Chair for My Mother, written by Vera B. Williams. And the other book is Scaredy Squirrel, which is written by Melanie Watt. So I hope those are helpful to you and you're helping children coping with difficult situations. Thanks so much for listening.